You're listening to the Morphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning into the Morphology Podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, you probably already know that I am a co-host on another podcast called Just Go Bike. Recently, Andrea and I caught up with Jason Sumner from the Ride the Rockies team, who is a longtime cyclist and a Colorado native living in Crested Butte. He's a journalist and has authored the book 75 Classic Rides Colorado. Ride the Rockies, a multi-day tour that explores communities in Colorado, has many similarities to RAGBRAI, the 7-day tour across Iowa, and has the history to prove it. Back in 1985, Claire Martin, a Denver Post reporter, came to Iowa to ride RAGBRAI and got hooked. She went back to Colorado and pitched the idea to the Denver Post. A year later, Ride the Rockies was born. www.ridetherockies.com is the website. And here is Jason, myself, and Andrea to tell us more about Ride the Rockies. A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show.
All right, listeners, I've got Morphology and our special guest for today, Jason Sumner, on the phone.
Hey, Jason.
How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're so excited to have Jason on the phone because he is our resident Ride the Rockies expert. So we're going to be picking his brain today.
Yes.
Yes,
Awesome.
Jason comes to us as a longtime cycling writer and journalist, and he's also authored a book called 75 Classic Rides Colorado. So I encourage you to look it up, and you'll see why as you listen to this podcast.
Oh, what was the name of that book?
75 Classic Rides Colorado.
Ooh, that is very cool. Amazon, here I come.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's get started by tell us a little bit about what type of bicycling you're into and what is bicycling like where you're from.
Yeah, sounds good. The short answer is all types. I would consider myself non-discriminatory when it comes to riding bikes. But I live in a town called Crested Butte, which is pretty high up in the central part of the Colorado Rockies. My living room's at 8,600 feet. So
Wow.
Right now, the only bike I could ride if I wanted to would be a fat bike because there's a couple feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah.
But come summertime, I'll spend 60 or 70% of my time riding mountain bikes, only because that's what is best around here. But I also love to get out on the road bike and the gravel bike and the commuter bike and pulling my kids around the neighborhood. So it's really a little bit of everything. And there's great road cycling around here too, but it takes a little while for the snow to melt and for the roads to clear and things like that. Go ahead.
Jason, I would guess if you came to Iowa and rode RAGBRAI, you would have the secret weapon of coming from high elevation because, where I live, I don't know about you, Andrea, but where I live, I think we're 800 feet of elevation. That's where I live. And here you are at 8,000. Like, you've got superpowers.
It definitely helps. One of the big things one of the biggest intimidating factors with Ride the Rockies, which is what we're going to talk about a little more in a few minutes, is acclimatization and getting ready for the altitude. And obviously living at altitude is maybe an unfair advantage. I have a few more, oxygen carrying red blood cells in my body just by proximity. It's by sleeping here, I get a benefit. But.
And I don't know if it's in my brain or if it's actually reality, but I was in Denver a couple weeks ago for the Ride the Rockies announcement party, and I literally could tell, when I was trying to sleep, I could just, everything felt different. And I'm like, is it the elevation or is it in my brain?
I think it's probably both.
Yeah.
I think people can let it sort of spiral out of control and be something that can end up having a really negative effect. But there's it's based in science and human physiology that there is such things as acclimatization, and there's a reason that there's Sherpas that take people to the top of Mount Everest because they're really good at breathing in a place that doesn't have a ton of oxygen. So I think the suggestion is that if you can, if somebody's gonna, whether it's ride the Rockies or just in general, if you can spend a little extra time on the front end of whatever endeavor it is on your bike and sort of get acclimatized, you'll feel a little better once you get out there. And the good news is the body does adapt, and so maybe that first day, you're feeling those steps up the stairs, but and I'll feel it. For instance, I'm going down to Arizona for a work project at the end of this week, and I know when I come back those first couple of days, I'll breathe a little heavier, running up the stairs to go chase my kids around or whatever. So,
okay, good. So it wasn't all in my brain then.
Yes.
Well, should we talk specifically about Ride the Rockies?
I'd love to. Yeah.
Let's dig in. I guess let's start from the start. Tell us just a little bit, sort of the 5-cent version of Ride the Rockies history and how it all started.
Yeah. So I had to dig into this a little bit. I did some research. So it goes all the way back to, and ironically, this is a great story. In 1985, a woman named Claire Martin, who was a reporter for the Denver Post, she's also a passionate cyclist. She headed off to Iowa and she did RAGBRAI.
What?
And she said, wow, this is awesome. What a cool event, bringing all these people together, shared passion of riding bikes. Colorado needs a RAGBRAI. And so she went back to her bosses at the Denver Post, told them about the amazing experience she had had at RAGBRAI, said we should do this. And at the time, the Denver Post had we'll call it an events/promotions arm within, obviously they're mainly a newspaper, but they had these other, I think they had a golf tournament and things like that. And so she pitched the idea of why don't we do something called Ride the Rockies? And I don't know exactly when the name was settled on. And according to a little bit of the research I did, Claire said, it took a little cajoling, but she talked the powers that be into doing it. And a year later, 1986, the first Ride the Rockies started in Grand Junction, covered 305 miles, and about 1,500 people joined up, and they went Grand Junction to Denver, and ironically covered a lot of the same terrain that we're going to cover at this year's race. Went through Glenwood Springs, went through Aspen, went through Dillon, went over some of the same passes: Independence Pass, Fremont Pass, Loveland Pass. So while not an exact historical replica of year one, the 2022 version is going to at least have some similarities. And so we're coming in. The event has evolved and changed over the years some, but it's sort of held to that main mission of just exposing people to the great road cycling in Colorado. And this will be year number 36. 1 year was missed, like a lot of things got canceled in 2020. So it's year 36, and here we go.
Wow. So it's amazing the connection between, direct connection to RAGBRAI, but also so similar because, RAGBRAI was founded by two journalists who were kind of getting out of work and wanted to ride across, do something, riding their bikes, and same sort of connection to a newspaper. And that's just crazy to think about.
Yeah. It's really cool. And it makes sense. A lot of ways to take a step. The newspaper connection aside, these types of events are just such an amazing, wonderful way to experience a place, experience cycling, experience, shared experience with like-minded people, that kind of thing. It's super fun. So,
agreed. And I think the draw for RAGBRAI in Iowa is that we have so many small communities. Typically they're within 10 to 15 miles from the previous town. So we're really able to showcase Iowa. And I'm assuming Ride the Rockies is similar. It might not be exactly the same, but that sounds like it's also the focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was, according to calculations based on last year's event, over the years, Ride the Rockies is started and or finished in 50 different communities.
Wow.
Across the state of Colorado. And obviously through those years, there's been a lot of repeat customers, if you will. Towns like Aspen and Breckenridge and Glenwood Springs have been frequent hosts, over the span of 35 years, for obvious reasons. And then, yeah, I mean, that's really, and I encourage anyone who hasn't experienced Ride the Rockies before. Ride the Rockies veterans already get this, that while the cycling and the scenery, the suffering, the exhilaration, all of those are huge factors in what makes the Ride the Rockies experience great. In a lot of ways, the biggest, number one thing is getting to sort of embed into the communities, and the communities will come out, and people will see at the finish line each day there will be a bunch of vendors, and some of those vendors will be, the high school basketball team will be selling spaghetti to try to raise money for, their next, season or things like that. And so there's this really neat connection between community and the people there. And that's part of Ride the Rockies has not necessarily ever been in the food business, last year notwithstanding, and that's a whole nother story. That was all pandemic driven, but typically, Ride the Rockies wants the communities to come out and wants the people who are doing Ride the Rockies to go into the communities and really experience the restaurants and the shops, and just really go and find out what these cool little places in Colorado are all about, because you get to visit some places that might not otherwise have been on your sort of checklist of places to go. So it's really neat in that respect.
Well, and so many places to visit in the short span of the ride. I mean, I might go to Breckenridge or I might go to Aspen, but I wouldn't go to 5, 6, however many different locations.
Yeah, so cool. Absolutely. Great point.
Yeah. I also want to point out, you said it's one of the things that make the ride great and suffering in the same sentence, and everyone believes you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's something about cyclists. They're just crazy like that.
Yeah. And this one's a good one. This one's got, I think we'll get to that, but yes, there are some major challenges along the way this year.
Well, and you mentioned the first Ride the Rockies, or at least back in the early days, there were like 1,500 riders. What's it like, this year in 2022? Is it still that big, or is it bigger?
It's a little bit bigger. I checked with the event director this morning just to make sure I had the number right. 2,500 is the max.
Oh, okay.
And it typically gets real close to, if not selling out. So I would encourage anyone who's, interested. There's still plenty of room right now, but spots are filling fast, and it's good to get in there, especially for things like hotels. There's some scarcity with some of the like hotel bookings. There's not 2,500 spots for people to do hotels,
right.
But a lot of people do camp as well. But yeah, you'll typically, and I think, at the end of the day, there's always a little bit of attrition, but figure you and roughly 2,000 of your best friends will be taking on this 436-mile, 6-day journey with 27,000 feet of climbing across the state of Colorado.
27,000, yikes. And Andrea, registration is open now, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And it's a long URL. So I'll just say, if you're interested in registration, go to the Ride the Rockies website, and it'll be right there at the click of a button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. RideTheRockies.com. And it's right there it's dead center on that homepage.
Awesome.
Yeah. Try to make it easy to find.
Yeah. Well, should we talk about the route this year? Because it's been obvious, just like RAGBRAI, that the route changes every year, right?
Yep, 100%. It's again, we'll retrace steps from years past, but every route has a slightly unique character. And this year's route starts in Copper Mountain, which is best known as a ski resort in the winter. Great skiing there in the winter, but there's also kind of a nice little village there, and a great place to bring 2,000 people together. And I won't go like town by town by town, but there's some great highlights along the way, and probably the biggest highlight honestly comes on day one, when the route will go through Glenwood Canyon. And Glenwood Canyon is bisect by Interstate 70, but there's also a fantastic bike path that goes through Glenwood Canyon. The other thing that goes through Glenwood Canyon that's far more prominent than either of those is the Colorado River, which was actually how Glenwood Canyon was constructed. But it's really cool. It's a historic first to the event, and I think it's gonna be a really neat. It's a long day. The good news is it's 110 miles, give or take, but it's most of the climbing is front loaded, so like you can at least get out and get after it and get the big climbing out of the way on the front, and then it's fairly flat the rest of the way you're cruising on either fronted roads or bike path along I-70 into Glenwood Canyon, through Glenwood Canyon, and to the finish on the other side in Glenwood Springs. So that is one of 2 100-mile days. The good news is the second 100-mile day is on day 3. So day 2, you get a little rest. It's a shorter day, only 31 miles. Glenwood Springs over to Basalt, and much less climbing. So you kind of like get a recovery day. Everyone's familiar with those. And then, but then again, wind it up again on day 3 for another 100-mile day. And it's probably, day 3 is probably the hardest day because we were over what's called Independence Pass. Summit elevation, 12,095 feet. And you'll climb about 4,000 feet. You'll kind of start on the far side of Aspen in a little town called Basalt and ride kind of up valley gently, and then all of a sudden the road's going to pop skyward and head up Independence Pass on the west side of Independence Pass, which is one of the sort of iconic climbs in all of Colorado. So that's going to be a ton of fun.
I'm just envisioning the views because on RAGBRAI, when you get to the top of there's obviously no mountains in Iowa, but you get to the top of a big climb, and that's usually where everyone's kind of stopped and taking their cameras out and phones out to take photographs. So I can only imagine the Colorado views.
Yeah, 100%. It's Independence Pass is amazing, as are there's several others. Loveland Pass is another one that we'll climb. I think I did a count. The route will actually cross the Continental Divide 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Typically, Continental Divide crossings, if you're not familiar, it's basically if water going to the left goes to the Atlantic Ocean, water going to the right goes to the Pacific Ocean. And the Continental Divide bisects the Rockies in Colorado. We'll cross it 5 different times. And in all those cases, it'll be at the top of a pass, and there's invariably a sign there. So I think it'll be fun. People can make it a little project. They can get their photo taken in front of the 5 different Continental Divide signs that we will pass along the way, and the associated scenery, which is pretty second to none. I'm biased. I'm a Colorado native and have lived here for most of my 51 years, and it is a very beautiful place to call home.
Yeah, I'm sure it's breathtaking. I think we have our scavenger hunt figured out for this year.
Yes.
There you
go. All right. So tell me, so that's what the route is going to be like. But let's get a little bit more granular. Tell us what is a typical day like for a rider? Maybe not the short 30-mile day, but let's say, when do you usually wake up and hit the road, and what is it like for a rider?
That's a great question. So the short answer is it varies a little bit, and I'll qualify it because what the Ride the Rockies format, and I'm assuming RAGBRAI probably is similar, is there's sort of a start window. It's not all 2,000 people lining up at 6:55 sharp and all rolling away at once. Now, that could happen, but it would be organic. And what typically it is there's an open start window, and that might say on a longer day that might start at 5 a.m. and go till 9 a.m. And I'm just I'm spitballing a little bit here.
Sure.
The reason being, some folks, they want to start early and get done early. Some folks kind of want to sleep in and don't mind starting a little later. Some folks ride really slowly, and they know that, and so they want to give themselves the maximum amount of time. Other folks are planning to, drool on their top tube the entire day because they're pushing themselves so hard and will need less time. And so that is a sort of self-selection thing. It's really important to think about that. And I think it's typically based on the slowest riders are maybe averaging 10 or 12 miles an hour. And so they need to think in their head when they start. So you'll get up early. How early it'll be a little bit up to you. You obviously got to get yourself fed. You get your bag packed up. What you do with your bag depends a little bit on the lodgings you choose, and there's essentially 2 variables. You can either sleep in a hotel or you can sleep in a tent. In either case, you'll need to pack up all your stuff and drop your bag at a predetermined location so that it can be transferred for you while you're out on your bike. You'll get some food in you, and again, Ride the Rockies is not necessarily in the food business, so this will be an opportunity to venture into the town, find a great place to get a bagel and a cup of coffee or whatever it is. There's also going to be vendors on site from the local community, and then you're jumping on your bike and you're pedaling and you're doing your thing, and the routes are exceptionally well marked. There are GPS files available, so you can track your progress on your head unit, on your mounted on your handlebars if you're so inclined. And there'll be a bevy of aid stations along the way, and those aid stations will have the standard fare that you would expect, the bananas and the hydration drinks and good sort of bike fuel, if you will. There's also typically a number of vendors. The pancake guy is really famous, and he literally is just the pancake guy. There's somebody, and those vendors maybe won't necessarily be at every aid station, but some of the more prominent aid stations, they'll set up shop and be selling their wares, whether it's pancakes or hot dogs or, things like that. And the aid stations are great. They're just sort of like this party of, celebration often, especially the ones that are at the top of the climbs and stuff. And you'll ride your bike and you'll ride with your friends, you'll ride by yourself, kind of whatever, however. The experience is very much what you want to make of it, which I really love about it. I think I often will sort of ride alone and then sort of just intermingle with people, and it's a really fun way to just meet new people out on the road and have conversations and find out where people are from and how their day is going. And I think it's good to know how to ride in a pace line, and because there are definitely some places where it'll be flat and wide open and windy, and if you can share the load a little bit and jump in those pace lines and have a little fun and save a little energy that way, and enjoy the scenery along the way, take pictures. I think that's another thing I really encourage anyone who's doing it to really try to embrace, not just look at the line ahead of you or the wheel in front of you and just try to get to the finish line, but really smell the proverbial roses. So hopefully that answers your question at least somewhat.
Oh yeah, man. If I am coming on this ride, I'm definitely going to be stopping and taking photos. Lots and lots of photos.
Yeah. I got to meet that pancake vendor. I got to try those pancakes. Everybody's been talking about him.
Yeah.
It's lunchtime for us right now. All I can think about is pancakes.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so then speaking of food, the rider gets done with their day, probably, gets their camp or hotel set up, showers up. Is there entertainment at night, or is there a gathering in the evenings?
Yeah. So again, it's kind of organic in some ways, but yes. So each day you will finish at it. It's typically sort of one of these three things. It's the city park in the town. It's a rec center, a community center, or maybe it's a high school. Somewhere the sort of kind of prerequisite here is that there's a big field and I know we were going to talk about this in a minute, where the camping can happen. And so you'll just see these rows and rows and rows of tents, and there'll be sections that are specifically earmarked for camping, for people to set up their tents, or there's actually a service where you can have somebody else set up your tent for you. So that's one part. But then, there'll be just this giant communal area where there'll be, everything from beer, of course. We'll have, I don't know who the beer sponsor is this year, so I won't speak to that. But, that post-ride beer, there's often live music. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, local vendors. So whether it's, a local restaurant coming in and selling their wares, out of a tent, but there'll be food to have, snacks, a nice shady trees, grass to sit in, just to, I call it sort of post-ride each day is maybe the 5 hours of recovery, relax, rehydrate, refuel, and rest.
Nice. Okay.
But also, a little bit of recreate, like hang out with your friends, talk to, hear about their day, tell them about your day. And also some people will venture into town and go find, a restaurant that they'd heard great things about, or so other folks may head back to their hotel room. That is like a sort of an add-on option, is you can sleep in hotels, and that's all pre-booked, and there's a service that'll move your bags around and handle all that for you. But I encourage everyone, that's sort of one of the most fun things, is just kind of meeting people and talking. And so the finish line area, which is also typically where the start is the next day, is a great place to, and then also shower trucks, bike storage. There's typically a giant massage tent, and they bring in a lot of massage therapists, either locally or from Denver, who will be doing recovery massage. So it's a fun place to be. You're always really excited when you get there.
So
I bet.
I know. I was gonna say, I heard pancakes, massage, beer.
There you go.
This is pretty
Ticks
exciting.
the right boxes.
You did mention a couple days that are over 100 miles. Any other challenges that you think the riders will be facing this year?
I'll knock on wood, but weather is invariably can be a challenge, and we've had, in the years I've been involved, we've had snow. We've had last year we had blistering heat. We had a really uncharacteristically warm June, and we had days where we were up at 12,000 feet, and yet it was still above 80 degrees. So being able to adapt to the weather, bringing the right clothing, understanding how your body's going to react to the weather is definitely a really, really important thing to sort out beforehand. The number one rule of sort of doing any big cycling endeavor is that, kind of do your experimentation beforehand. Don't do it at the event. But, knock on wood, we'll have a perfect, June can be, typically June is fairly stable weather-wise, but we can go through, cycles where every afternoon we'll have a thunderstorm roll through, and it's the afternoon showers, and in some ways you kind of look forward to it. It cools things off, and gives. But if you're out, if you're up at the top of Independence Pass in a lightning storm, that's not fun, because there's you're at 12,000 feet. So, and that's another reason I think it's important for people to pay attention to what's going on with the weather on a day-to-day basis. And if like, oh, hey, it looks like it's going to rain tomorrow afternoon, and yet we have a 100-mile day and we have to climb over a 12,000 foot pass, you might want to jump on your bike a little bit earlier and try to get out. It's one thing to be in a rainstorm when you're pedaling along in some valley, an entirely different one to be descending off the top of a above tree line summit pass, or Rocky Mountain Pass. So but yeah, we'll see. And the other thing is obviously just those big miles and a lot of climbing. That is a challenge unlike any other, when you're riding bikes.
Yeah, a lot of elevation, a lot. I did notice on the website, and actually I got to meet some of the people from some organizations that have teams for this event. And I know that, like you said, you can register by yourself and go by yourself, and you're sure to meet plenty of other people. But a couple of teams that I wanted to at least showcase really quick, because they do so much as far as nonprofits go, and that is the Samaritan Cycling Team. And if anybody watched the route announcement party, they were the team that got to hold up each of the towns when we announced the towns. So that was really cool. Like Tom Schwein and his crew got up on stage, and it's just amazing what they do as far as raising money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's Samaritan Cycling and Davis Finney Foundation, and probably the other two big prominent ones are the Adaptive Sports and the We Ride For. And in all cases, they each bring a slightly different approach to it, but they're, raising awareness and also raising money. I think the number I've heard Tom throw out was that through his association with Ride the Rockies, Samaritan Cycling's raised roughly $1 million, and it's for providing funds to people who are experiencing homelessness and kind of need emergency assistance, food, clothing, shelter in the state of Colorado. So obviously, really great organization. Davis Finney Foundation, I bet a lot of people are familiar with that. Davis Finney is sort of one of America's first great professional cyclists. Also is living with Parkinson's, living well with Parkinson's, but his foundation helps raise money to help other people, live and deal with Parkinson's disease. And it's a great organization, and you'll see them out there. They'll all be in there. They'll have their matching kits and they'll ride together. And it's really neat to just see them out there. And that's really the event. That's in a lot of ways what the event is all about. The former operators of the event was actually what's called the Denver Post Community Foundation, and it's a nonprofit that has been doing philanthropic good deeds in the state of Colorado for years and years, and have raised approaching, I think, $500,000 through Ride the Rockies for communities that they visit along the way, through grants and, sort of all kinds of different charitable giving. And I know I talked to the event director a little bit about this. For instance, each of the towns that the event visits this year will receive $10,000 from from Ride the Rockies, both to sort of help them, organize and put on the best show that they possibly can, but also to choose a charity, a local charity that is important to them, and give them some money so I think it's $5,000 for the local organizing communities and another $5,000 for a designated local charity. So the idea is to really touch the communities that the event is visiting.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole part of it's really cool. And in a lot of ways, that's what this thing's all about. And what's made it such a big success is, the communities embrace the event because they know the good that it brings.
Yeah. And as a rider, you're also contributing to all of those small communities when you go in there and, grab a Gatorade or have lunch or, whatever you may do while you're in those communities, you are benefiting them.
100%. So,
and I wanted to mention, when you go to the website, you can see lots of information about some of these major teams like we mentioned, and there also is an opportunity to join them. So if you are going to do Ride the Rockies solo, but you want to be part of a team and also part of some sort of nonprofit that's giving back, I would definitely check out, like the Davis Finney Foundation or Samaritan Cycling. Those are just two of them, but there's quite a few that are listed on the website.
Right on. Yeah, that's a great point. And they're just a bunch of really fun people. So it'd be, all kinds of good would come of that.
Well, it's been really interesting and really making me look forward to having the Ride the Rockies event in June, my first ever Ride the Rockies.
Yeah.
So Jason, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. And I look forward to hearing more from you as we get closer to the ride.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure. It's a really neat event to be part of. So
yeah.
I'm excited to see where Ventures Endurance can take it, and it's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about Ride the Rockies, or if you want to look up and read more about what we've been talking about today, you can go to ridetherockies.com. It's also where you can go register. And if you have any questions you'd like to ask us directly, you can email info@ridetherockies.com.
Thanks, Jason, for coming on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, listeners, that's it for this week. If you're interested in learning more about my bike tour across the U.S., go to my website, which is murphologypodcast.com, and click on the tab labeled Murph's Biking the U.S. Email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/murphology and visit both my Facebook and Instagram pages for daily entertainment. Also, a quick shout out to Simmons Electric for sponsoring this episode. I have more great episodes in the pipeline, so I hope you continue to be a Murphology podcast listener. Thank you.